Hello, EduMagicians. Welcome to the EduMagic podcast with your host, Dr. Sam Fessich. Dr. Sam is a professor of education, author of EduMagic, and a pumpkin spice latte fan. This podcast is designed for pre-service teachers. Remember, friends, teaching doesn't begin at graduation, but during that first class at 8 a.m. Let's get this party started.
I'm Jeff Eichler.
And I'm Kirsten Rickert, and we are the hosts of the Getting Unstuck podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network.
Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey EduMagicians, it's Sam, and before we start into this episode, I want to share with you about an amazing resource. It's called the Educator Candidate Member Portal. AAEE provides you with resources such as virtual job fairs, a job board, interview tips and prep, resume building, webinars. You can even get a copy of the Job Search Handbook digitally. So head on over to aaee.org and create your free Educator Candidate Member account today. Friends, one more thing before we get started. This episode is brought to you by my new course, Digital Portfolios from Scratch to Interview Ready. Head on over to sfessich.com/courses for more information about this self-paced, hands-on virtual workshop. Hello, EduMagicians, and welcome to another episode of the EduMagic podcast. My name is Dr. Sam Fessich, and today I have with me Athea Davis, and we're talking all about mindfulness. It's not just a buzzword, friends. It's something we need to be practicing as future educators, as new teachers, and as veteran teachers. Athea, welcome to the show.
Hey, Sam. I'm super excited to be here.
It's great to have you. So we are talking all about mindfulness, and I'm sure we're going to throw in some awesome sauce along.
Of course, yes.
I love the energy, and we were able to connect over on social. And I think at the end of every email, it's like, awesome sauce. I'm like, oh, yes, we have got to connect because I am a huge fan of that as well. Yay.
Definitely.
So Athea, would you mind sharing about your teaching story, what brought you into education, and what keeps you coming back?
Yeah, so I have a sort of non-typical, entryway into education. I'm a mindfulness educator, so we're really rare in the profession. So I teach all grades and coach teachers on mindfulness practices, mindset practices, self-care, mental, emotional health, social emotional learning, all the things. Love it so much. But I transitioned careers. I was in law and then went into education. And I went through something really hard, a very hard tragedy in my life. First hard thing was going through a prior divorce. And then the second really hard thing is that my former spouse took his own life. I have a now 15-year-old from that prior relationship. So going through those really hard things propelled me to look at alternative modes and methods of healing. I swore, this is so funny because I swore I would never practice yoga, was not my thing or nothing like that. I'm like, what am I going to get from it? And I've been a lifetime runner for a long time. So that's how I really tuned into my own self-care. And then when I went through those really hard things, I needed something else. And I finally listened to a friend who said, really go to a yoga class. And I thought, okay, fine. And so I went and I did a lot of healing in that space. And I had a teacher that said, have you ever thought about teaching? And I thought, this is weird, crazy. And I thought, no, I didn't even want to be here. So I just organically followed. What would that look like? Okay, like this feels really good. Meaning I'm, being able to release really difficult mental states and emotions, the trauma that I experienced. And as I walked through becoming a yoga teacher, then my son was young at the time, and I was really passionate about how these tools were positively impacting my life. How can I share them with him and kids his age that are also navigating challenge? So then I became a certified children's yoga teacher, began to teach all the things, family yoga, kids yoga, And then I had the opportunity to work with a nonprofit that they were implementing. At the time, it was called Health and Wellness, but it was like a mindfully infused social and emotional learning curriculum into a large urban district here in Houston, the Houston Independent School District. And so I went and so I was assigned to a school and worked at the school for, the study was for 3 years. They were looking at the impact of this, mindfully infused social emotional learning curriculum, the impact it would have on students in terms of their overall academic, performance, the attendance rate, testing, they were looking at a lot of different things. And once the study was over, it was just over, right? But for me, I discovered that I absolutely loved working with kids, doing this in schools. And so then I became a certified teacher, because I knew that in order to really take this work and keep it in the schools, I had to be, a certified teacher. I couldn't be someone from the outside, or just even because I was qualified to teach yoga or children's yoga, mindfulness, etc. So I did that. And then the school I was assigned to, they loved the program so much that they kept and hired me on. Wow. And I think, to me, that just was this pivotal moment that said to me, this is exactly where I need to be. It was not easy. It was really hard. I call it my blood, sweat, and tears story, because it was, at the time, we're looking at almost 8 years ago that I'm talking about going into schools and doing this work. And kids, they didn't know, my students didn't know. I worked in a very low socioeconomic status school, white woman coming into a predominantly Black and brown school. Yoga was like, it was just like, oh, another thing. You're here for 6 months. We'll see you later. And it was hard. The culture was hard. There was just a lot of things, this particular community they were navigating. And so, and plus the things I was navigating in my own life. But here's the thing, like, I just felt so motivated to learn, to know, like, how can I make this relatable? Why is this not working? I was so curious, and I just really, as one, she's my soul sister now. At the time, we were just colleagues. But as she said, I think it was my 3rd or 4th year there, she's like, you're home now. And like, she saw that transition from, newbie me coming into a school to the moment where I had just been like, I would go home crying, like, no, this is not what I thought it would be. This is not where I'm supposed to be, to, wow, this is where I'm supposed to be. And I'm learning and growing. And I know that was a long answer, but I think it was really important to really give your listeners an understanding of how I came into this work. It wasn't just like, hey, one day I show up at a school and this is what I'm doing. And that's led me to where I am today. I work at KIPP Texas Public Schools. I'm a mindfulness educator working with right now K through 7th grade. We're a new school in the KIPP model. So, and what that means is that our elementary will feed into our middle school, will then feed into our high school. So we're all on one campus, but as a new school, we don't have all grades yet because we just became a new school 2 years ago. So we're slowly bringing on new grades. So that being said, I've been doing this for the past almost 8 years. So it's been awesome and I love it.
You had mentioned earlier that you're a mindfulness teacher and they're very rare. How many mindfulness teachers are there, like, in your area? Like, how do you connect with other mindfulness teachers?
Yeah, it's a good question. Definitely through social media.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, there's a great organization called the Coalition of Schools Educating Mindfully. And it was started by a parent, Tracy Healer. She's in Chicago. And I think I learned of Tracy. It may have been on LinkedIn. I honestly can't remember. I meet so many people online. And I learned that she had this organization and she was connecting fellow teachers, whether they're doing social and emotional learning or mindfulness or some kind of yoga-based activity within their physical education program. So she's created this awesome organization. And that's one way, because I can stay connected with people all across the United States. And at KIPP, for instance, there are a handful of mindfulness/yoga teachers that are dedicated positions within the school. And so we definitely make it a point to stay in touch, to learn what each person is doing within their own schools and classrooms. And it's something I've been really passionate about. Seeing my ultimate vision is to have like a mindfulness director or someone within. Now, social and emotional learning departments are new, so they haven't always been around. Even when I was within the Houston Independent School District, they had just started a new department called social and emotional learning. That was not there when I started, but they developed a whole department dedicated to SEL work. And whether it's through, and KIPP just recently, at least KIPP Houston or KIPP Texas just recently also created an SEL department. And I also believe that at least while I'm still alive, that we're going to have these positions in leadership, so we can, because I don't see these positions fading away. I do see them becoming more prominent, because I think we're seeing within the context of the pandemic how vital our students, our teachers' mental and emotional health is. It's not just like, hey, you have some, what do they call them, EAP benefits, and go see a therapist. And I do think therapy is super key and important. But at the same time, what kind of culture are we creating within our schools and within our classrooms? And I think mindfulness is key to doing that. I think it's foundational to everything in which brings us, joy, success, and happiness.
Let's talk about some of those foundational terms. You're talking about mindfulness, you're talking about social emotional learning. I think sometimes, we can get those confused. Are they two separate things? How would you describe them to somebody totally new to these two topics? So let's start with mindfulness, and then we can talk about social emotional learning, just the foundations, the basics of both of those.
Yeah, great question. So mindfulness is paying special attention on purpose with no judgment, no attachment. And it's something that we must train ourselves to do. We don't just come born being able to pay special attention all the time. You may see states and kids, for instance, be in those present moment, paying special attention on purpose when they're in their zone, playing with Legos or art, or trying to fiddle with a math problem, or playing with Play-Doh. That would be, paying special attention on purpose. But that's essentially what it is, paying special attention on purpose. And you can do that externally when you're on a walk. What am I noticing? What am I hearing? And so we go through the five senses. How does it feel? What am I feeling? Do I feel the wind on my skin? What am I hearing? What am I seeing? So once you go through the five senses, then you have the practice of going inward. What do I notice on the inside? What sensations in my body do I notice? What thoughts do I notice? What about my emotions? So it's a very I call it like a little curious adventure. You get really curious about your internal state and the external environment around you. So as you take that one understanding that mindfulness is paying special attention and kind of one thing at one time, you travel through your senses, and then you begin to connect to this new world on the inside, where you begin to learn about yourself, your self-identity, who you are, what your mental space is like, emotional space. And this is how it's connected to social and emotional learning, because this is even elevated within schools. It hasn't always been a prime, concern, but with more schools adopting SEL departments and curriculums, especially within the past year, it's concerned with self-management, self-awareness, social skills. Well, these things are not things that we can go around and touch. That's self-regulation, that I can control my thoughts and emotions. Well, how do I do that? I have to practice mindfulness. I have to pay special attention to what's going on the inside. Well, how do I do that? Well, there are a variety of things that you can do. You can do mindful breathing, mindful movement, yoga, meditation, mindful art, sound. There's so many access points in which we can discover these new layers of ourselves. So then we have more information about, oh, that's how I learn how to self-manage and self-regulate. Oh, that's how I have empathy. I become more aware of my own internal states and what I need, what brings me joy, what I need to fill my cup in love. Then I know I can identify that with others. I hope that makes sense. And
Yes. And I love how the tangible acts of, okay, for example, if you're going on a walk outside, what are some things you're feeling, getting in touch with your senses and then digging inside? How is that making me feel? What are some thoughts that are coming to me as I'm walking through this space and noticing these things? I think that I loved all that tangible stuff. I'm thinking, okay, I got to write this down in the show notes because these are so important. Is mindfulness, you had mentioned, it relates to self-regulation, self-motivation, all those things. How does it relate to social emotional learning? Can you think of it like a social emotional learning as mindfulness being a part of that, or is it vice versa, or do they complement each other? How would you put that in the space of social emotional learning and mindfulness?
I think mindfulness is the foundation in which SEL is built. So oftentimes I really like to refer to it, if we're really talking about a good social and emotional learning curriculum and program, it will be mindfully infused. Because I don't think that we can have a good SEL program without having the mindfulness piece. Any social emotional learning curriculum that I've seen, whether we're talking about character, whether we're talking about restorative practices, restorative justice, whether we're talking about classroom management, whether we're talking about, social skills in elementary or middle school or high school, how do we even get there? Well, it starts with us as the person.
Yes.
And what do we need to ask ourselves? What am I noticing in my thoughts and in my emotion? Those two control everything that we do. And so much of our behavior is from this internal space. I think it was, there's a Buddhist monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, that has, I think it was Thich Nhat Hanh that said this, or maybe it was the Dalai Lama. I get everybody confused now. But there was mindfulness sheds light on those things in which we are not aware of. So it helps you build your self-awareness and awareness. And how do we build social skills? We have to be aware of us and how we relate to others, how they're relating to us. And we build awareness through these kind of internal practices when we're asking ourselves those questions. We have these automatic thoughts that are on autopilot all the time. And they're great when we build the habit of teaching and doing things and we don't have to think about it, or driving or riding our bike or whatever that is. That's awesome. It saves us brain space and brain time. But when we go through our day and our life on these automatic thoughts, we're not present. We miss things, whether it's growing opportunities, relationships that can help us, feel joy, can help us grow. We just miss a lot. And so when we have this mindfulness piece, we can really tune in. And, the essence of it is it helps you cultivate curiosity. I think curiosity is key. Why am I showing up this way? That's interesting. Why do I sound this way in this conversation? I wonder why that person responded to me the way that they did. It's putting that curiosity hat on. And I think that the way we do that is when we get curious about ourselves and we realize, you know what? I just noticed that my thoughts were like going 100 miles an hour. And maybe I didn't make sense and really connect to this person because I'm not really connected to their mental or emotional state. And it didn't feel like there was a really good exchange there in terms, if we're talking about social skill or relationship building. And so maybe I need to take a moment, get in tune with myself, what I call the awesome sauce. It's that special place on the inside where we feel extra alive and magical and vibrant. We all have access to it, to spark, but we oftentimes don't feel it because our thoughts and emotions get in the way. And so I think we're at a time in life that, it's pivotal, it's vital to, no matter what you're doing, that you learn some degree of your own mental and emotional space. And how do we do that? We don't have a scanner for it. I mean,
right.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, who knows what will happen 100 years from now. So your best, way to do that is to practice these mindfulness tools and techniques, and everybody's different. So it doesn't mean you have to sit in meditation for 30 minutes, though that could be something that you really enjoy. It could be like, doing a mindful walk, or sometimes you need movement, you need all three. It matters, the words that we say to ourselves, that's another thing.
Yes.
Like, we have self-talk all the time. I was just doing some lessons with my middle schoolers, my primary students too, about self-talk, and like, what is self-talk? That's interesting. A lot of us aren't even aware that we're talking to ourselves a lot. And I think, because so much of our talk rules our behavior, it's really important to spend some time on what's going on up there. And the way that you notice what's going on up there is by doing those exercises that help you become more aware. And it's that awareness that then you discover, like, this place. You're like, wow, I didn't realize like how awesome a walk could be, Yes. I didn't realize how like awesome like this cup of tea could be, or whatever it is, or a conversation. So I could go on and on, but again, it helps shine a light on that which we cannot see.
Athea, this is such a beautiful conversation. I'm loving just being a learner alongside my listeners today and thinking more about, you brought so much up about self-talk, about mindfulness with our senses. And it just, as you were sharing about how this social emotional departments and curriculums are starting to emerge, it kind of brought me to another thought. I know this is not on our topic, but for our students who are interviewing soon, is this a topic that they could ask about, or they could find out more possibly on a school's website and engage in conversation about that, the importance of social emotional learning at the school in which they are applying for?
Absolutely, Sam. What a great question. I completely advocate for any new teacher going in, or any teacher interviewing for a position, that you ask about mindfully infused social and emotional learning. Why? Because it's the foundation of our success. And by success, I mean living a joy-filled, purpose-filled life, no matter what that is for you. So when I approach math or science or reading, whatever it is, I'm not going to be in learning mode. And I'll have to add too, my expertise is in trauma-informed practices. So if I've experienced something really challenging, and the fact is we've had little trauma, big trauma, it's been different. Doesn't mean mine's worse or better than yours or anybody else, but it impacts us. It impacts our mental state, our emotional state. If we're not addressing that, but we're asking our students to learn, I think we're missing the mark. And we talk about whole child learning. How are we doing whole child learning without this necessary piece? So yes. I absolutely think it's essential that the school in some way is looking at or implementing, or beginning to implement these kinds of practices for educators and for their students as well. I truly believe, like I said, as long as I'm alive, I will not allow, like, my why is so clear. I will not allow this conversation to die out. I remember somebody asked me, going back to the story, like, how did I get into this in education when I was working for the nonprofit? It was this Sonima Foundation at the time, but now it's Pure Edge Inc. he's like, so what happens when all this is over? What happens when the study is over? And I said, you know what happens is that the people on the ground, the boots on the ground, the teachers that are teaching this content, they're going to be so dang good that the school, the students, the teachers are going to say, I have to have this. Wow, I see how important this is. And somehow I've kept that promise this far. And now I see like, okay, now we need leadership. Now we need someone saying, we need these positions in schools. We need someone that is aligning our programs that are in alignment with standards, that are in alignment with where we're heading our kids to prepare them for jobs we don't even know about. Speaking of that, like that causes like a lot of anxiety too, I know, for a lot of people, but all the more reason that we must have these practices in schools. And super great question. And definitely advocate for you asking that if you're going into a school.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I felt like I got on my soapbox for a minute.
My gosh, no, it was a great soapbox. So my audience, they're future teachers. They're in between two worlds here. They're students and they're learning what it means to be an educator. And they are also, taking general ed classes and all those things. So what advice do you have for them to be practicing mindfulness as a college student studying to be an educator?
I think, being really intentional with time for your internal self-care. And so what I mean by that is that it may be trial and error process to understand what works for me, but I definitely recommend that you have some kind of mindfulness practice, whether it's movement-based and you like yoga, whether it's meditation-based, whether you're using an app, whether you do journaling or mindful art, that you are in a space where you're in solitude and silence. I think those are super important. We can certainly, I'm all about the awesome sauce. And when I work with my younger students, we use fun music and all the things and, all the bells and whistles. And I make sure that we have a space where we have that moment of quiet. We have that moment of slowing down. And I think to get curious about that and be intentional with your time. I'm a huge advocate that you do it in the morning. So you really prepare for the day, that you're preparing your mindset for what you want to happen. So I think when you give yourself, and you can start off slow, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, work yourself up to 30. I give myself an hour. And you may not be ready to do that, right? And that's okay. You may just want to start off really small or wonder how you're going to have the time. So I would just, again, start off small, set it on your calendar, put it on a Post-it note, dress yourself in Post-it notes, whatever the system that works for you. But I will say writing it down or putting it on the calendar alerts our brain. And we're more likely to actually actuate on that activity. And then just like, trial error, what do you like to do? And then maybe you don't know. And so try a couple of different things, notice how you feel, go through that practice. And then what works, stick with it. And I'll say not everything will work every day. So you kind of have to have a few different tools in your pocket, and then make sure that's sacred time for yourself. I promise that when you keep that time for yourself, it will make a huge impact in your day, and particularly in the morning time, because that time will define how the rest of your day will go. You want things in your life, it's going to happen right there in that time, because it happens with intentionality. And there's power in what we tell ourselves, what we desire with that intention. Desire plus will equals results, that intention. And we'll start to see that happen in our life, in the classroom, with our goals, etc.
I really like how you had mentioned putting it in during the morning time, maybe kind of making it a routine. I think sometimes college students, roll out of bed, go to class type thing, but you really have to invest in time for you, so you are prepared mentally, physically for that day? Do you have something in your, you've eaten something that you've, gotten out, you're ready to go for classes? Because just rolling out of bed, you're still a little foggy and, you might be hungry. You might have these other needs that you're not able to focus in on for that learning. So being intentional, and I love the idea of doing it in the morning because you're setting the stage for that day.
Exactly. Yes. So key to have that as a routine. And just thinking about too, how can you expect to be your best if you're just not giving yourself the time and your mind the time and space to know what you're aiming for, to just roll out and kind of let things happen. Like you kind of know what's going to happen, but you're not 100% sure. What would your life look like if you gave yourself that time and knew exactly what you're aiming for every single day?
Oh, I love that. That's wonderful. I think that's something, we should look into practicing and trying out. Like you said, start with 5 minutes and work your way up. Find different modes that work for you, different strategies that work for you. So, Athea, you talked a lot about curriculum and SEL curriculum and what it looks like in the classroom. If we are new teachers, let's talk about what are some strategies we can implement into our classroom. And then piggybacking off of that, if we are really into mindfulness, social emotional learning, how can we go to learn more, get certified in that area?
Great questions. I love for classroom teachers, and by classroom teachers, we're typically talking about like the core subjects.
Yes.
To implement these practices in their day, just as we talked a moment ago about starting in the morning, getting you prepared for the day, then you getting your students and your classroom culture prepared for the day. So spending the 5 to 10 minutes, just depending on what you have going on, to get your class ready for the day by implementing mindful breathing exercises. Affirmations are huge. Like, I love it so much because it helps our students really get into the habit of the positive self-talk, to be intentional about where we want to go in the day in our classroom. Those are two things you can do in 5 minutes or less. Do a kind of breathing exercise and an affirmation. In fact, it's still a favorite way that I still like to open up my classes, because we're coming together and we're creating a new space. How do we want to do that? So often with teachers, I really coach them to do the morning, transition times, and to close out the end of the day. If you can't do all three of those, maybe just try one. So I'd start in the morning, and in transition, between transition activities, can you do a quick mindful breathing exercise? Can you pull up an app if you don't feel skilled and leading something like that? And then towards the end of the day, maybe even doing like a circle where you do like gratitude, right? What are we grateful for today in our class? What did we learn? Who are we, grateful for, and what did they do, and how did they bring joy to our day? Even just doing something like that for a few moments before we close out.
I think those are beautiful strategies, and they also relate to that classroom culture, the classroom respect and rapport, connections between peers, between teachers, between colleagues. And I think that that can really shine a light on classroom management, on behavior, on procedures. We can do mindful procedures, thinking about, moving from one class activity to another. What do we need to be doing? How are we feeling about this? Let's, if we're moving from reading to math, maybe we're feeling a little anxious. Why do you think we're feeling that way? Let's talk through it. Those types, I think that's really, really key. I love those 3 strategies that you had shared. Now, what about our new teachers? Like, oh my gosh, I am totally digging this. How do I get certified? What are my next steps? I'm a certified teacher, but now I want to add mindfulness into that certification or endorsement area.
I love it. So I actually have a digital program called Mindfulness Education University for Educators. It's all online. So many amazing resources. So there are 5 modules all about emotions, habits, relationships, environment, leadership, and service. Things that I think that are really key that that our students and our teachers, definitely should have in their toolbox. And I have a whole curriculum that goes along with those 5 modules. And lessons and suggested ideas. So what I love about Mindfulness Education University for Educators is that I created it with the intent of the educator going through themselves. So then when they will be prepared to go into the classroom and they can implement exactly what I've given them in the course. They can make it their own, make it workable for them. It comes with many like mindfulness songs, meditations. Today's going to be Awesome Sauce workbook and journal. Just a lot of cool resources, but it's all online. And I coach you through the process. So that's something to definitely check out, Mindfulness Education University for Educators. And you can find out about that program on my website at atheadavis.com. And if you're looking for resources in your classroom, I have a couple. I have a book called Today's Going to Be Awesome Sauce, Daily Meditations for Youth, Parents, and Families. And this book is very contemplative in the sense that maybe I want to share a little story with my students to start off their day. And so there are 365 ways to tune into what I call the awesome sauce, right? That extra spark. And so they're very short, you can read them to class, and there are mindful breathing mantras in each of the 365 days. And you can also recite them as a class like an affirmation to really prepare and build up your confidence and your mindset and your joy factor for sure. And then I have an affirmation and art card deck called Today's Going to Be Awesome Sauce. As many teachers know, visuals are super important, makes the concepts extra sticky. So when I share the affirmation, it's attached to a beautiful watercolor image. My students oftentimes, they remember the images. Like, I really like that. It's about the wave where you ride the middle wave, and they remember it because they remember the art picture and the affirmation that went along with that. So those are a couple things they can definitely check out. And I do want to say, Sam, if I can, that I just have a new partnership with the Ninja Focus app. It is for kids, for teachers, for parents, and I have meditations on the app. So it's the Ninja Focus app. Right now I have 7 story-themed meditations called Funny Bones Meditations for ages 4 through 8. So story themed, they're a lot of fun and definitely can increase the confidence and joy factor. And then each month I will be providing more guided meditations for that age group and for teens as well, particularly with like mindful pep talks with self-worth and confidence and those types of things.
Oh my gosh, Athea, thank you so much for sharing all of those resources. I'll make sure I drop them on our show notes, friends, so you can click on each one and learn more about the cards, the book, the course, and the Ninja Focused app.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ninja Focus.
Awesome. Athea, how can we connect with you online with all of our questions and ideas and comments, and where can we learn more?
Definitely. So a few things. Definitely go to the website, atheadavis.com. Check out my podcast, Mindful Living with Athea Davis. I'm in all the places. So many great people I get to talk to and share a lot about what I talked about here with you today. And on social, you can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, even TikTok, I think. Athea Davis. I try to be in all the spaces,
Yes.
Intentionally, because it's a lot of fun to connect and learn and grow from each other. So all of those places at Athea Davis. So
Thank you. Thank you so much, Athea. This has been a fantastic conversation. I know my listeners are going to have to listen to it a couple times because you dropped so many gems. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sam. It's been great to be on your show today.
And there you have it, EduMagicians. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends. For more EduMagic, check out sfessage.com and follow Dr. Sam on Twitter and Instagram at sfessage. Until next time, you have the EduMagic within you.